Throughout the centuries, he witnessed empires fall, kings perish, and time dissolve like sand in the wind. But Marius de Romanus remained, the guardian of the oldest secrets of the night. Among the vampires who walk in the shadows of eternity, few carry a legacy as grand and enigmatic as Marius de Romanus. A being shaped by time, a witness to eras, and a guardian of mysteries that transcend human comprehension. Unlike the vampires consumed by the thirst for blood or the desire for domination, Marius cultivated something that few of his kind have managed to preserve: wisdom, patience, and a profound sense of purpose. He is not just a predator of the night, he is a scholar of history, a lover of the arts, and a strategist who survived countless centuries without losing his identity. In this video, we will dive deep into Marius's fascinating journey. We will explore his life as a mortal in the Roman Empire, the unexpected transformation that made him immortal, and the choices that shaped his journey through the centuries. We will see how he dealt with the burdens and benefits of immortality, how he balanced his thirst for knowledge with the forced isolation, and how his existence intertwined with iconic figures of the vampire mythology created by Anne Rice. Furthermore, we will analyze his loves, his tragedies, and his supernatural powers. Understanding Marius's significance in the complex web of relationships that connect vampires throughout history. His influence goes far beyond what one might imagine. From being the guardian of the first vampires to mentoring some of the most powerful immortals in the saga, he left an indelible mark on the very fate of the vampire race. And here is the promise. By watching until the end, you will understand how Marius de Romanus became one of the most important vampires in the Vampire Chronicles, and why his existence shaped the fate of so many other immortals. You will see that his story is not just about blood and immortality, but about knowledge, art, sacrifice, and a legacy that resists time itself. Born in 30 BC in the city of Massilia, a Greek colony under Roman rule, Marius de Romanus belonged to an aristocratic family raised under ideals of greatness and intellectual dominance. From an early age, he showed a sharp mind, interested in philosophy, history, and the arts. While other young nobles were trained for war and politics, Marius sought knowledge above all. He studied the great Greek thinkers, wrote accounts of the empire's transformations, and cultivated an unwavering passion for art, especially painting. His life seemed to follow a promising path. As a chronicler and scholar, he traveled across various regions of the Roman Empire, recording historical events and collecting information about the customs of different peoples. His privileged position granted him access to rare libraries, philosophical debates, and the most refined courts of the time. However, this life of learning and prestige was brutally interrupted when, during one of his travels, he was captured by a group of pagan druids. The druids believed Marius possessed something special, a destiny that needed to be fulfilled. They took him to a hidden temple where they performed rituals in worship of a being they called the living god. What Marius didn't know was that this entity was not a deity, but an ancient vampire, an immortal being who carried centuries of secrets and power. During a dark ritual, Marius was chosen as the new vessel for immortality. In one moment, he was a man of flesh and blood. In the next, he felt his blood burn, his breath falter, and his heart become eternal. The transformation was a terrible experience. The fire of immortality burned within him, making his mind faster, his senses sharper, and his body stronger. But along with these gifts came the overwhelming thirst for blood, the awareness that he could never return to being human, and the weight of carrying an existence that would stretch over the centuries. He had become a predator of the night, forever separated from the humanity he had once admired. After his transformation, Marius discovered that he was not just another vampire. He had been chosen for a mission. Vampires all over the world were being ravaged by a mysterious destruction, spontaneously burning themselves without apparent explanation. The cause of this calamity was unknown, and Marius was tasked with uncovering the truth behind this deadly phenomenon. His quest led him to the heart of Egypt, where he uncovered a secret few vampires knew. The first of their kind, Akasha and Enkiel, the so-called parents of the damned. They were the original vampires, the first to be transformed, and carried within them the essence of the entire immortal race. Their blood was more powerful than any other, and as long as they were alive, all vampires in the world would continue to exist. Marius became hypnotized by the majesty and mystery of these dormant figures. Their bodies were motionless as statues, but an unimaginable power emanated from them. He realized that these beings were the source of immortality, and any threat to them would mean the extinction of all vampires. It was at this moment that Marius made a decision that would define his existence for the centuries to come. He would become the guardian of these ancient beings. With this new purpose, Marius began to live in isolation, hiding Akasha and Enkiel in secret temples, protecting them from any external threat. But being a guardian came at a high cost. He lost his humanity, his mortal bonds, and the freedom to live as an ordinary man. As civilization advanced and the world changed around him, Marius remained bound to his duty, watching over the first vampires as an eternal sentinel. Centuries passed, and he watched empires rise and fall, saw the fall of Rome, the flourishing of Christianity, and the decline of gods once worshipped. But while the mortal world evolved, the world of vampires remained unchanged, always hidden in the shadows, always dependent on the ancient powers. However, Marius did not allow himself to be consumed by the melancholy of eternity. Unlike other vampires who succumbed to chaos and darkness, he kept his mind sharp, striving to balance wisdom and power. He became a scholar of his own vampiric nature, accumulating forbidden knowledge and developing a rational view of his existence. But above all, he sought to understand how far immortality could take him. Over time, Marius realized that in order to survive in a world that constantly changed, he needed to learn how to adapt. He was not an impetuous warrior like Lestat, or a relentless manipulator like Armand. His strength lay in knowledge and strategy. Marius learned how to move among mortals without drawing attention, assuming different identities and building networks of influence over the ages. He established secret residences in various parts of the world, always in places of great cultural importance. Venice at the height of the Renaissance, Rome under the splendor of the Church, Paris in the Age of Enlightenment. Marius was present at the greatest moments of human civilization, absorbing every new thought, every new art, every new revolution. He was not just a vampire. He was a guardian of history, a collector of wisdom, and a preserver of culture. His supernatural abilities developed to their fullest. He mastered telepathy, telekinesis, instant regeneration, and even control over fire, one of the rarest abilities among vampires. His name became synonymous with mystery and power, respected among immortals, and feared by those who dared challenge his authority. Yet, even with all this power, he continued to seek answers. He wanted to understand his true role in immortality, to find a balance between being a predator and being a thinking being. His journey was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. After his transformation, Marius became the guardian of the first vampires in history, Akasha and Enkil, a responsibility that would shape his existence for the following centuries. Isolated in secret temples and hidden fortresses, he watched over the dormant bodies of the ancient rulers, ensuring that no other vampire would approach to try to take their power. He understood that as long as Akasha and Enkil existed, the vampire lineage would continue, and any threat against them could result in the destruction of all immortals. Even with the duty of protecting the firsts, Marius never stopped questioning the meaning of his existence and the nature of the power he guarded. Unlike other vampires, who saw immortality as a curse or an opportunity to give in to chaos, Marius sought a higher purpose. He believed he could use his wisdom to guide younger vampires, offering them a less destructive path. However, keeping the secrets of Akasha and Enkil required isolation and renunciation, distancing him from any lasting emotional bonds. Over the centuries, Marius traveled through various empires, witnessing the transformations of humanity and the rise and fall of civilizations. In each era, he assumed a new identity, using his vast wealth and knowledge to influence the world without drawing attention to his true nature. He moved between palaces and temples, between royal courts and secret societies, always as a silent observer, but never indifferent to the fate of mortals. However, his role as a guardian became increasingly dangerous. Many ancient vampires longed for Akasha's power for themselves, and Marius had to face various threats over the centuries. At the same time, he struggled with the weight of time, trying to maintain his sanity amid the solitude of his existence. But the great turning point in his journey was yet to come, and his encounter with a new immortal would change everything. Despite his solitary nature, Marius did not remain isolated forever. During one of his periods of seclusion, he encountered a young slave named Amadeo, a boy of rare beauty and sharp intelligence, who would later become known as Armand. Seeing potential in the boy, Marius rescued him from slavery and took him to his luxurious residence in Venice, where he provided him with a refined education and teachings on art, philosophy, and freedom. For years, Marius cared for Armand like a son, cultivating in him a strong and independent spirit. But this paternal love was abruptly interrupted by a devastating attack. A group of fanatical vampires, followers of an obscure religious order, invaded his residence and kidnapped Armand. They forcibly transformed him into a vampire and deprived him of Marius's guidance, forcing him to submit to a regime of cruel obedience, blindly devoted to darkness. When Marius finally managed to find Armand again, the young man was no longer the same. Marked by the torture and fanaticism imposed by the vampires who had created him, Armand rejected his former master's teachings and chose to walk his own dark path. This loss deeply affected Marius, leaving an emotional scar that would never disappear. For the first time, he felt the true weight of his immortality, the inability to protect those he loved from the cruel fate that the vampire world had in store for them. This event not only shook Marius, but also transformed his view of younger vampires. He came to understand that it wasn't enough to simply guide them or offer them knowledge. the darkness was relentless, and each of them would have to fight their own demons to survive. Still, the love for Armand never disappeared, and his fate would remain intertwined with that of the young vampire in future events. Long before Armand, another love had deeply marked Marius's existence: Pandora, a woman of brilliant intelligence and indomitable spirit. Still in her mortal life, during the Roman Empire, Marius and Pandora met and shared an intense connection. He loved her not only for her beauty, but also for her sharp mind and fierce independence, a rarity among women of the time. However, fate separated them, and Marius was transformed into a vampire without her. Driven by this love that never faded, he searched for Pandora over the centuries, and when he finally found her, he offered her the gift of immortality. However, the relationship between the two was never easy. Pandora was as powerful as she was unpredictable, and her desire for freedom constantly clashed with Marius's protective view. Although they shared a deep history and love, their differences became barriers that were impossible to ignore. Time, which should have strengthened them, only pushed them further apart. Pandora rejected Marius's control and protection, choosing to follow her own path in the immortal world. The separation was painful for both, but inevitable. Marius, no matter how hard he tried, could never bind her to an existence that was not entirely hers. Deep down, he knew that Pandora was an indomitable force, and that loving her meant letting her go. This loss left a permanent mark on Marius. If he had once believed that he could build lasting bonds in eternity, now he began to understand that love between vampires was as fragile as it was among mortals. Immortality, far from being a gift, made everything more fleeting. But his journey was not over. There were more lessons to be learned and challenges to be faced. Unlike many vampires who succumbed to darkness and chaos, Marius found in art a refuge from the monotony of immortality. Over the centuries, he became a master painter, sculptor, and patron of the arts, driven by the belief that beauty could give meaning to eternity. His works were not only expressions of his talent, but also silent testaments to the eras he had lived through. Each brushstroke, each sculpture, was an attempt to capture what immortality threatened to erase. Emotion, the moment, humanity. During the Renaissance, Marius settled in Venice, where he lived as an eccentric nobleman, surrounded by artists and intellectuals. He financed painters, writers, and inventors, influencing the cultural progress of the time without ever revealing his true nature. It was during this period that he further refined his artistic skills, becoming a legend among the city's artists. However, despite his life surrounded by beauty, loneliness never ceased to haunt him. Art, for Marius, was a form of resistance against the coldness of time. While other vampires gave in to destruction, he dedicated himself to creation. But immortality is cruel, and everything he built was doomed to disappear. Cities he loved were reduced to ruins, paintings he created were forgotten, and those he taught eventually departed. Even so, he never gave up on his search for meaning. For Marius, art was not just a pastime. It was the last proof that, despite being an immortal predator, he still had a soul. But darkness never allowed him to find peace for long, and new threats always emerged, forcing him to abandon everything and start anew in another era, another city, another life. For centuries, Marius maintained his role as the guardian of the first vampires, secretly protecting Akasha and Enkiel. However, the balance of his existence was shattered when Lestat de Lioncourt, driven by his insatiable curiosity and thirst for power, awakened Akasha from her long sleep. Lestat's act released an uncontrollable force that Marius had fought for centuries to keep dormant. Akasha, now awakened, was no longer the silent queen Marius had known, but a destructive force bent on reshaping the world in her image. She saw humanity as a plague and intended to exterminate most of mankind, leaving only women to rule a new empire. Horrified by her genocidal plan, Marius attempted to stop her but was brutally defeated by his former queen, who left him on the brink of destruction. His recovery was slow and painful, but his determination remained intact. Marius swore vengeance and joined forces with other powerful vampires, including Lestat, Maharet, and Makare, to face Akasha. In the final confrontation, Akasha was destroyed, and the balance of vampires was restored, but not without consequences. After centuries as a guardian, Marius saw his duty undone in a single moment, leaving him without purpose for the first time in his long existence. Without Akasha to protect, Marius found himself free, but also lost. The one who had dedicated eternity to preserving a secret now had to find new meaning in his existence. The world had changed. Vampires were scattered across the globe, and the age of isolation was coming to an end. Now, Marius had to decide whether he would remain a mere observer or take on a new role in the fate of the immortals. After centuries of protecting the first vampires and seeking knowledge, Marius now found himself in a new world, where vampires no longer needed to hide in the shadows as before. The rise of figures like Lestat brought a new era for the immortals, where exposure and adaptation became as important as survival. Marius, one of the oldest among the living vampires, watched this transformation with curiosity, but also with caution. Even without the responsibility of guarding Akasha and Enkiel, Marius never ceased to be a guide for younger vampires. His wisdom and experience were sought by those wishing to better understand their existence. Many sought his advice, but few could truly understand him. He had witnessed the fall of empires, the destruction of kingdoms, and the rise of new gods, and knew that the cycle of eternity would never close. His old loves and apprentices, such as Pandora, Armand, and even Bianca Solderini, had gone their separate ways. Some remained in his orbit, while others disappeared into the flow of time. But Marius had always been a survivor, a strategist who knew when to stay and when to leave. He understood that true power was not in brute strength or domination, but in the wisdom of knowing when to intervene and when to observe. The story of Marius de Romanus is far from over. He continues his journey, adapting to the modern world, accumulating knowledge, and preserving what he considers beautiful. Between darkness and light, between creation and destruction, he remains. A vampire who chose eternity not as a burden, but as an ever-evolving work of art. The story of Marius de Romanus is a testament to what it means to live in eternity. More than a vampire, he is a guardian of the past, a survivor of time, and an artist who seeks to capture the fleeting beauty of the world. While many immortals surrender to darkness or chaos, Marius continues on his own path, guided by knowledge, art, and the weight of all he has witnessed. If you enjoyed this journey through the centuries with Marius, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content about the immortals of the Vampire Chronicles and other legendary characters in fiction. Comment below on your favorite Marius moment in the saga and which other character you'd like to see here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.